Good evening, everyone. The poem I chose to analyze today is Tulips by Sylvia Plath. And Tulips was about a bouquet of tulips that was given to her while she was hospitalized for appendectomy. And there she thought about writing her experience of how this beautiful and vibrant bouquet of flowers bothered her and even disturbed her a little bit, as she'd rather be completely indulged in the whiteness and peacefulness of her room in the hospital. And for the author, just a little bit of introduction. She is known for her confessional style of writing, and she often writes about themes of mental illness, death, and gender roles, and is usually tied to a personal experience of hers. So if you try to read her poems, you'll probably find her writing style to be very personal, like almost reading a diary, but very beautifully worded out. Although most of the context of hers would be very sad, but still it is powerful and somewhat relatable. So I would advise you or invite you to read if you'd like. And for the reason that I chose this poem, it's actually because of its name. Tulips is one of my favorite flowers as it is very beautiful and vibrant. But once I started reading this poem, I was quite surprised because it was not what I was expecting it to be. But instead, she used tulips as a contrast to her state of being, which I will talk more about in the analysis. Also, I can't say I relate to her situation entirely, but I definitely had some moments in my life where I felt isolation, where I just wanted to retreat from everything. Maybe it from like responsibilities, illness, and maybe just overall exhaustion. But for some reason, sometimes life would just surprise us and finds a way to pull us back in, like how the tulips did for Sylvia in this poem. And before I go into the themes and literary devices that was used in the poem, I would first like you to hear a few portions of the poem, and here it is, Tulips by Sylvia Plath. The tulips are too excitable. It is winter here. Look how white everything is, how quiet, how snowed in. I am learning peacefulness, lying by myself quietly. As the light lies on these white walls, this bed, these hands, I am nobody. I have nothing to do with explosions. I have given my name and my day clothes up to the nurses, and my history to the anesthetist, and my body to surgeons. They have propped my head between the pillow and the sheet cuff, like an eye between two white lids that will not shut. Stupid pupil, it has to take everything in. The nurses pass and pass. They are no trouble. They pass the way gulls pass inland in their white caps, doing things with their hands, one just the same as another, so it is impossible to tell how many there are. My body is like a pebble to them. They tend it as water. Tends to the pebbles, it must run over, smoothing them gently. They bring me numbness in their bright needles. They bring me sleep. And here I would skip a few sections. The tulips are too red in the first place. They hurt me. Even through even through the gift paper, I could hear them breathe. Lightly, through their white swaddlings, like an awful baby. The redness talks to my wound, it corresponds. They are subtle. They seem to float, though they weigh me down, upsetting me with their sudden tongues and their color, a dozen red lead sinkers around my neck. Nobody watched me before, now I am watched. The tulips turn to me, and the window behind me, where, once a day, the light slowly widens and slowly thins, and I see myself, flat, ridiculous, a cut paper shadow, between the eye of the sun and the eyes of the tulips, and I have no face. I have wanted to efface myself. The vivid tulips eat my oxygen. Before they came, the air was calm enough, coming and going breath by breath without any fuss. Then the tulips filled it up like a loud noise. Now, the air snags and eddies round them, the way a river snags and eddies round a sunken rust-red engine. They concentrate my attention, that was happy, playing and resting without committing itself. The walls also seem to be warming themselves. The tulips should be behind bars, like dangerous animals. They are opening like the mouth of some great African cat. And I am aware of my heart. It opens and closes. Its bowl of red blooms out of sheer love of me. The water I taste is warm and salt like the sea, and comes from a country far away as health. And here I'm going to be talking about the theme and literary devices that I found on the poem. The themes that was recurring for this poem was mostly about contradicting items such as life versus death and isolation versus connection. For the first one, life versus death, she often makes comparisons between these two, and one part that shows this comparison was when she mentioned how peaceful and white the hospital was, which represents acceptance of death, and the red tulip symbolizes life and the will to live. And for isolation versus connection, Sylvia makes the reader feel that she's ready to get rid of everything, including her identity, and be completely isolated. But the tulips, for some reason, it forces her to remember that she has a life outside of the hospital room, outside of her sickness, and really makes her think that these things are still worth living for. And for the literary devices, throughout her poem, she used personification, imagery, symbolism, as well as simile and metaphor. Firstly, personification. One instance you would see personification is when she makes the tulips seem alive with the use of verbs or action words like breathe, talk, and eat my oxygen as if it was a human person. And second, imagery and symbolism. We would see the contrast of white and red, in which white represents peace and numbness, while red means life or emotion. And I think this helps enhance the conflict that is going on in the poem. And metaphor could be seen when she compares herself to a small, insignificant pebble that emphasizes her feelings of detachment and passivity. And she then compares the hospital to water that constantly moves over her, tending to her without any connection, which makes her feel powerless and less of an individual. And this part really highlights Sylvia's desire to become nothing, nothing at all, and just be smoothed away like a pebble. And lastly, simile. She compares the tulips to an awful baby, emphasizing her unwanted presence and suffocating energy. She also describes them opening like the mouth of some great African cat, reinforcing their overwhelming and loud nature. And so, for a conclusion, Tulips by Sylvia Plath is a really powerful poem that explores the tension between life and death, isolation and connection. And what I found so interesting is how something as simple as a bouquet of flowers can feel so overwhelming to a person. And it's almost like an unwelcome reminder that life is still moving forward. Like there's still life outside of this sickness, of this exhaustion. And yeah, it forces her to come out even when she just wants to disappear into the quiet. Through her use of imagery and personification, she makes the tulips feel alive, almost intrusive, pulling her back into reality when she's really trying so hard to detach. And personally, this poem really made me think about those moments when we just want to retreat from everything, whether it's from like stress, illness, or just exhaustion. And yet, life has a funny way of pulling us back in, and sometimes in ways we don't expect, or as simple as things like a bouquet of flowers. And yeah, that would be my analysis for Tulips by Sylvia Plath. And I would like to thank you for listening to this video, and I'd love to hear what you think. Do you see the tulips as a symbol of hope or more of a burden for the narrator, for Sylvia? Or did something else stand out to you? Please feel free to share your thoughts or your comments and just ask any questions. Thank you.